I finished work early, actually. You know, I was supposed to finish at 8, and the assistant manager said to me, Jim, look, it's 7:10. You came in well early. I'd done a double shift. And he was like, you can go home. So I was like, oh, do I? And I thought, right, yeah, cool, I'm going to go home. And it was 7:10. Basically, I was driving home from work as it was about an hour's drive. As I got coming into the village that I live in, some lady didn't stop on a my right of way T junction, and she just came in and she just smashed the car from the side. You assume they're going to stop, or I certainly did, because I'd done that journey so many times that every time a car had come from there, they'd stop. So even though you're paying attention, and I remember it got to the point where I thought they're not going to stop, and the car then just, smashed into me. The car flipped over, spun round.
Your car flipped over?
My car flipped over, spun round, hit into...
Do you remember that feeling?
Yeah, very well. All of a sudden, everything had just vanished. I just felt like this was the right moment for me to die. I don't know why, that's what I felt like as they hit. I thought, as they say, your life flashes before you, but in those moments. And mine was kind of the life that I wasn't going to live, and it was just kind of like, well, if this is... I submitted fully to the idea that I was going to die in that moment. I really did just... And I was so peaceful. And then when it all stopped and the car came back round and I was sitting up, the bit where the horn is in the middle of the steering wheel was smoking. Well, I thought it was smoking, so I thought the car was on fire. So then I'm like, oh, well, I don't like the idea of the car being on fire, so I'm frantically trying to get out. I can't quite get out the door. I managed to kick the door open, I get out the car and I collapse on the road. And luckily...
What time of day was it? It's evening?
This was about... probably 7:45. It was summer, so it was still light. Okay. It was still light. I collapsed and luckily there was a nurse in the car behind me, and coming the other way was a paramedic, and so they were there almost instantly. The male passenger of the woman who drove into me's car just got out screaming at her. And saying, sorry mate, and I just kind of in a delirium. I remember that the ambulance came, they put me in a stretcher, and I'd been in hospital probably about 8 hours, and I was desperate for a cigarette, and so they were like, do you want to stay in and we do further monitoring, or do you want to go? And so I thought, oh no, I'll go and have a cigarette, I don't think there's anything wrong with me. And
so you checked yourself out?
They offered me to be checked out. They said we can keep you in a bit longer, or you can go, and just monitor. So it was kind of like a choice. They gave me the choice, and I chose to leave straight away. I was like, yeah, I want to go home. At this point, it's 6 a.m. I'd been at work all day, and my wife and my mum were with me. And I remember we came home, and I remember sitting on the sofa, and I was being like, oh, I'm so lucky that weren't worse. Like, if I'd been in my other car, because I was in a big Volkswagen Passat estate, a big, heavy car. And I had like a little Ford, it was an old car. I wouldn't have made, I very doubt I would have made the car crash, I would have survived.
Oof. Yeah. There's a lot of things to be thinking about, aren't there? Particularly if you've just had a son as well, especially at that moment when it's your first one. Like, everything's then all about him, isn't it? You're going to be thinking, I need to get better as soon as possible for him.
The guy that had headhunted me as well, he had been brought in to the business to help turn it around. So it was in a period of fluctuation, a lot of stock issues, a lot of problems, and he needed me back. And when I first rang him, he was so okay, take all the time you need, but, come back. And so I took 2 weeks off. I went back to work, and I shouldn't have. My ribs were still hurting. I was still in agony, but it was a sense of duty. I wanted to provide for the family. It was about a week after that, I was like, no, I can't do this. Like, I really need some more time off. I was just in agony. All my muscles were hurting. My back was hurting, and I was in the warehouse, moving sofas around. And even when they have to make reasonable adjustments, then I was just standing on the computer in the warehouse, standing all day. And it really got to me over the next few months. Like, it built up. The pain wasn't going. I couldn't understand why the pain wasn't going, and I was obsessed with how peaceful I was at that moment where I thought I was going to die. So when I had the car crash, I remember when the smoke was coming out of the steering wheel, I turned round, and where they'd hit was where my son's car seat was, and it was completely crumpled, completely destroyed. You know, it would have been absolutely horrific had somebody been in that car seat.
Right.
And in my dream, every night, that was what was happening. So I was waking up in these cold sweats. I wasn't sleeping. I was having these horrible dreams. I was having to go to work, working shift patterns.
From this vantage point, years later, what you're describing sounds like post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
Did you know that's what it was at the time?
No, not a clue. I honestly, but at the time, I thought I'd cheated fate. And I thought that I was meant to die, and that all this pain was just because that I was supposed to be dead. It really messed I'd never experienced anything like that before, you know, any sort of... I'd always been a man, you know, and I know that's... I almost laugh when I say that now, because I realise how detrimental that was actually to my health and this period of my life.
What, trying to keep up a front of...
I'm a cope, I'm fine. Oh, it was only a car crash, I didn't have any scratches, but you know, not thinking anything, shake these dreams off, not thinking, you know, just trying to carry on like hadn't just been through what I'd been through.
Yeah.
And we drove down to Cornwall, my wife had drove down to Cornwall, and when I got there I just remember like sobbing, and it was, I don't remember sobbing like that ever before. And I was just in this pain, and my missus was worried, and she just said, look, you can't do your job anymore. I said, no, I still can. And then I went back to the office, or back to the warehouse, and my first night I remember coming home and just sobbing again, like I had on holiday, just like I couldn't process. All I was processing is that I was supposed to die, I'm not supposed to still be here, I'm not supposed to be at work, you know, that's why I'm in this pain and I can't cope with it. Like,
and they're not having any medical or psychological support at this point, apart from your family?
I've got some painkillers from the doctor, you
Sure.
know. At this point I think I was on cocodamals. So yeah. And
did you start Googling around, like, I'm having these feelings, or you just completely internalised it? Really?
I started looking up if suicide was covered by my life insurance, and started researching how to kill yourself.
Did you say that to your wife?
No.
Was that something that you were very serious about doing? That doesn't sound like a cry for help.
That wasn't a cry for help. It was, I believed that I needed to die. I was supposed to die in the car crash. The feeling that I got of just peace, I didn't want to deal with the pain. I didn't want to deal with all these feelings I was suppressing of not being able to be a man, not being able to work. Or I'd been the bread earner for all our relationship, pretty much, you know, the higher salary, taking Lou out, like, and I knew our relationship was never built on that, but it was deep within me that I needed to be doing this, you know, and so I never addressed any of it. My friend had died. He was travelling in New Zealand, and he unfortunately drowned, and I was actually planning on killing myself the weekend I found out he had drowned. And all my friends were really busted up, and even at that time I didn't see what me taking my own life would have done to those people. I couldn't see it. Even though I was sad, I was like, right, I'm just going to wait till his funeral and then I'll do me, so that everybody's not. And I remember New Year's Eve, for example, I wrote all my friends these little letters, and they all thought it was really weird, nice, because, you know, it was my favourite things about them all. And yeah, I knew that was going to be the memory they had of me. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I remember the funeral was over. It was the day before, and I thought, right, now's the day. You know, it was just, that's it. This is my day. I had a tear up when I said goodbye to my son. You know, I went and I said goodbye to him. He was sitting out there, and I was like, right, as soon as she takes him up for the bath, I'm just going to go out to the thingy. And so Mrs. picks the son up, goes upstairs to take to the bath, and my dog starts going nuts. She's cottoned on to something, what I'm up to or something, and she starts going nuts. So I shut her in here, and I just go out to the garage, and obviously, the dog just carried on going absolutely nuts. So Lou comes down, and so the dog saved my life. If the dog hadn't have gone crazy and alarmed Lou, she would never have gone into the garage, and I would never have been alive. And it was her face. She walked into the garage and I saw her face, and she had Theo in her arms. She was like, look at, and at that moment I realised, it almost like hit me. Shit, what am I doing to Lou? What am I doing to the other people in my life? I need help. And so I burst into tears. Lou's burst into tears. I promised her I'd go get help. So the next day I go to the doctors. They refer me to the mental health services, who do like an interview. Didn't take me long to get a referral to Malden, which is a town nearby. You know, they've got mental health services there. They gave me some drugs and they said, fine. 2 days later, I was driving in my car to an appointment, and I drove past the site of the crash. And a white van came from the same side as the woman who had hit me, and my neck just started jerking, and I just started shouting cunt. And then the whole journey home I was shouting cunt, fuck off, getting really scared, like what is going on, why are these noises coming out of me? Pulled up at the appointment and I couldn't walk. I couldn't walk out the car. I couldn't do, I was stuttering, I was shouting, all of
and
these.
that had never happened before, none of those symptoms.
Nothing had ever happened like that before. Very, very soon after, almost I think when I got to the appointment, I went out to see the chiropractor, or tried to get help from them about what was going on, and he said, I think this is Tourette's, and actually the swearing was Tourette's, but the fits and the seizures are this non-epileptic attack syndrome or disorder, or seizures, or so there was a lot going on, and so there was a while we thought it was just like sudden onset of Tourette's, and the physical pain is exacerbated by these violent body movements. So if you imagine I'm suffering from a pretty serious case of whiplash, and then my neck is being thrown violently across to the side every 10 seconds, causing me extreme agony in the bits that were already hurting so much that I couldn't work. So at this point in my life, I was absolutely... I knew I needed to live for Lou, and I knew suicide was no longer an option, but my existence had become so terrible. Yeah, it was an awful time.
How chronic was the Tourette's then? So you said you were getting out of the car and you were uncontrollably shouting cunt.
It was constant. So my symptoms from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, and I didn't go to bed without, all the painkiller and all the meds that I was on. The first day that it was up, I was up for 48 hours, just violently shaking, unable to control my body, my arms moving, my head's moving. Really, I didn't know Tourette's could be like that. I didn't know that these neurological problems could have such extreme, violent symptoms. And it was, and I say violent as in because they're so sudden. They were never aimed at anybody or hurt myself physically, but they were violent as in, I could throw myself off the chair. I could fall off the bed. I could smash my head against a wall. Yeah, and so...
And I didn't know that you could start having the symptoms of Tourette's as a result of a trauma. I mean, I actually thought Tourette's was something people were born with. That's as much as I know. Did you know that was possible?
So... It's a highly contested issue as it goes, actually. And there was a period of my life where I had facial squints. So I remember when I was about 16, I had like a compulsion to pull a facial squint. It was around about the time of my GCSEs, and then I had another squint at the time of my parents' divorce. So it happened like twice in my life, which is Tourette's. We associate Tourette's with swearing, but actually
it's a tick.
And so I did have tics as a child, but that they were very brief, very went away. But at that point I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought I had a brain bleed. I thought I had a brain injury. That's what I thought was going on.
And incidentally, I'm just curious, I think a lot of people listening will be, the fact that you reach for the C word, which is pretty much the most offensive thing you can shout out, is there any conscious element of that? Is there a part of your brain that's thinking the word before you say it? Or
No, it just comes out. This is it. It's like a sneeze. It's the best way to describe it. It's just there, and it's when that happened, I was freaking out because I wasn't in control. I used to manage a lot of people, and they're people that live around here, and seeing them on the street, shouting at them. My tics can be very racist. And this is a horrible thing. So I feel like that's not part of my character. So it brings up a lot of conflict. You say this stuff to somebody who's just walking down the street, and it's. I went from a middle class upbringing, a white male upbringing with probably more privilege than I could have ever comprehended at that time, to all of a sudden, anywhere I go, everybody's staring at me. Everybody's staring at me, even if they don't mean to. If somebody's shouting, you're looking, because it's a natural reaction.
How did your parents react when they saw your tics?
It's awkward, isn't it? So it was very awkward, and it wasn't for a while till my mum understood them, and I don't think my dad still does, if I'm honest, It wasn't until my mum shouted at me once over, something, and it sent me into a seizure. Then all of a sudden I'm on a seizure, and once my mum saw me seizure, just on the fact that she'd raised her voice slightly, she was like, oh, this is way more serious than I thought it was. Even my mum thought it was.
So you were put on a bunch of medication to try and deal with all of these complex neurological and physical problems.
Yeah, and I was on a lot, I was on lorazepam, diazepam, morphine, codeine, amitriptyline, I think I've said lorazepam and diazepam, risperidone. I was on one, this one pill, and they gave me it for one day, and I was just reciting my NHS number over and over. My missus thought that, something terrible had happened, but this drug, they don't normally prescribe it anymore. It's like a old 70s psych drug. And it made me lose my mind, and this was something they were willing to give me. And so on my journey, that's always been a difficult memory to have, like how messed up these pills they put me on did. My tics weren't as violent, but I would have a lot more seizures. So I'd have a lot more fits on the floor for, say, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then, a period of calm for 10 minutes perhaps, and then another one. My stutter was still terrible. I'd losing my hair. There was blood in my stools all the time. So at this point, this stuff's happening to me. I'm like, I can't carry on pills. I can't do it. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better option. And I was chatting to a friend. I used to play an online game, and we're all still in a WhatsApp, and we migrated from our MSN days. One of the guys in there was like, Jim, in Canada, they treat people with your condition with cannabis. Have you tried it? And I thought, I looked at my missus and was like, I don't know if I want to try it again. It really weren't good for me, all those years ago. I'm talking at this time, it's probably been a decade since, and she speak. But I went on YouTube and I just thought, I'll see if anybody's talking about it, and I typed in cannabis and Tourette's, and this video came up of a guy who almost had exactly the same symptoms as me: the stutter, the noises, the movement problems. And he smokes this joint of cannabis and it all disappears. And me and my missus are looking at each other like, no, this can't be right. So I ring my mate who I knew would have a contact. He put me in the contact. 10 minutes later, literally 10 minutes later, I had some at my door. I knew how to roll it because I'd been a smoker, so, tobacco smoker at that time. So I rolled myself this little joint.
Did you ask what you were going to get, though?
No,
I just for cannabis?
Yeah, I just said, can you drop me... I explained to him that I was going to try and use it... Medicinally, and he dropped it off. I smoked it, and everything stopped. My tics stopped for the first time in 7 months. I just dropped to my knees and started crying. I could not believe that this plant could give me such relief. We could not believe that, this plant that we could grow in our garden, it doesn't take much skill to put a seed in the ground and water it, could change my life. in 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes, probably 5 minutes, 15 minutes from watching this video, my life had been changed. It was.
Did you physically relax as
physically relaxed?
Describe how that felt.
You're fighting your body all day, every day. You're getting no respite. You can't control it. You can't control your legs, your arms, any of it. And then all of a sudden, my stutter went. I was able to talk. I could stand up. I could walk about. I could dance. I could do whatever I wanted to do again. So we were, how do I get this? Was the next step. How do I get this?
At this point, I should tell you that the whole time we've been talking, Jim has been occasionally pausing to take small puffs from his vaporizer. Inside is a little capsule containing a flower. That flower is 0.2 grams of skunk, his hourly prescription. Next, Jim explains what he's had to sacrifice to get his cannabis legally. And you'll hear what he sounds like when he hasn't taken his medicine. That's after this. Welcome back. Let's return to my conversation with Jim Finch now, who you can find online at youtube.com/Jim Finch, because once he'd seen the benefits that cannabis had on alleviating his Tourette's, he decided to make some videos of his own. And in his videos, just as in the video that he saw that first inspired him to try cannabis, Jim asked his wife and carer, Lou, to first film him unmedicated so that viewers can see his Tourette's in full swing, and then medicated after taking some puffs on his vaporizer to show the dramatic difference in his speech and body movements. This is what Jim sounds like without his medication.
What are we doing today, Jim?
Speak! Speak! Today, I'm speak! Back off! Back off! Today I'm gonna be showing. Speak. Today I'm gonna be showing you the profound effects my cannabis prescription has on my condition.
And how are you feeling at the moment?
I'll be honest, it's pretty exhausting and pretty painful.
Throughout our interview, Jim has been taking his medication, openly. But his first experimentations were with cannabis from the black market. Fortunately, the law had recently changed, and Jim was able to get a referral from his GP to a private medical cannabis centre in London. He made sure he was prepared for his consultation.
I knew that it was legal. I knew that these were the first doctors prescribing it. I researched everything. I was, up at 6. I was down at 8, just looking up cannabis. Now, if you listen to NICE guidelines where it's like, there's no benefit for cannabis at all, you're ignoring all the evidence around the world. And so I started looking up all the evidence from Canada, from America, from Israel. Israel's got a lot of research on it. And so I filled myself with knowledge because I wanted to be prepared and I wanted to be able to talk the same language as the doctor. We went in and I was talking a different language to the doctor. He didn't know nothing. He didn't know about terpenes. He didn't know about cannabinoids. He knew about THC and CBD, but there's hundreds of them. He didn't know about the flavonoids. And so I'm there, shaking. It's been quite a traumatic thing. Like, my tics are bad. I'm still on all my medication. And I thought this guy was going to know. And afterwards, he just wanted my money. He was, maybe not. Maybe that's unfair. But it was a company. And he was a doctor, and he's well more versed in it now, 3 years on. I've seen him give speeches, and he seems to know a lot more about the endocannabinoid system, the terpenes, the flavonoids, the cannabinoids. But at the time, he didn't. He just was like, okay, you say cannabis flower helps you? Yeah, okay. Now, I'd got a few more bits on the black market, and I'd had an experience where one bit sent me into a seizure. Sent me straight in. I've had the puff, was hoping for the relief, and bang, I'm gone into a seizure.
What was that?
That's called a sativa. So you've got 3 main types of cannabis. You have indicas, sativas, and ruderalis. Now, indicas, and this is just a rule of thumb, it's not absolute, but indicas are very sedative, tend to be relaxing. Sativas tend to be uplifting, energizing, and ruderalis tend to grow really quickly but actually have quite dull effects, and as a plant it's not used very much. And it was actually the drug dealer, the local neighbourhood drug dealer, who explained all this to me. And he explained in detail to me that some sativas are uplifting and that everybody's cannabinoid system was unique. So I thought the doctor was going to know as much as this guy, and the doctor didn't have a clue, And so I'm telling the doctor, well, I've had a sativa before, and it sent me into a seizure, so I only want the indicas. The main stuff sold in Britain at the moment comes from 3 sources. You have Israel, there's a place in Canada, and then there's also a place in Spain, and that's where we get our flowers from. Ironically, Britain exports 85% of the world's medical cannabis that passes over borders. Like, that's not allowed to be used in Britain.
And the stuff that you got on prescription then, what's the process? Because you can't go to Boots with it, can you? How do you get it delivered to you?
It's delivered to your door.
From a postie?
So it's all tracked, it's got to be signed for, they have to take pictures of you with it in your house. Right. So you have to show your photo ID. So it's a bit more than getting a parcel, but it's...
And what mechanic company. Does it arrive in? Because I presume you're not smoking pot when they send it to you.
Yeah, they're little pots. So they're little pots. I've got... here's one. So this is what my prescription comes. This is my prescription. So
it's a white tub. It looks like pseudocreme or something.
Yeah, and then inside is just your cannabis.
And that's pure, is it? That isn't skunk?
That is skunk, yeah. So skunk is the name of a particular type of strain of cannabis. So it's an indica strain.
What I've heard, right? Sure. Phone-in radio, magazine articles, talking to mates. Skunk fucks you up because it's mixed with other stuff. Cannabis, pure cannabis, that's the stuff they used to smoke in the 60s. That's fine.
There are nearly over 10,000 strains of cannabis. Each strain has a different makeup of terpenes, flavonoids, cannabinoids, and each way it's grown will bring out certain aspects of the plant. So you could have 2 seeds that are identical, grow them in different conditions, and the plants will come out completely different. You can't just say, oh, skunk. What they were... I think they might mean spice, or it might just be blatant propaganda. Because actually, on my investigation, skunk is a strain.
This stuff, how do you take it then?
So, in a vaporizer, I take 0.2 grams in a little capsule, in a dosing capsule. I put it into my vaporizer, and I inhale that. And
is that something that anyone would use recreationally? It's not like a bong, is it?
People are using it now because it's such a healthy way to consume it. It has no tar, so it's right. It's much better than smoking it.
But do you have those side effects that people worry about when they take it too much recreationally? That you're sleepy, that you're hungry?
I mean, yeah. Some strains cause hunger, some don't, and so I don't always get hungry. But sleepy, it gets to probably about 4 o'clock. I have a half-hour nap, and then I wake up.
But then there's the cost. I mean, it's one thing to sell a second car in a desperate situation to go and see the doctor who can prescribe you cannabis once. It's another thing to say, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be paying for a private prescription for cannabis. How much does that cost?
At the moment, my prescription costs me £665 a month.
Wow.
Every 3 months, you have to have a consultation, which costs £65, and for a repeat prescription, it costs £30. And then I'm prescribed 4 grams of flour a day, which comes to it's 100. I'm on a project with subsidised medicine, so there is a company called Drug Science running a project for so that the costs come down, because before I was paying, £1,200 for 10 days worth, whereas now I'm paying £600 for 30 days worth. So the costs have dropped. But
that's still, I mean, that's the price of rent or a mortgage, isn't it?
it's the price of mortgage. We're actually selling our house. We're packing up at the moment, and we're going to be selling it in February to move in with the in-laws so that we can better afford the medication and the better quality of life. It's
How do you feel about that? Because this is a big sort of hot debate at the moment, isn't it, as to whether elderly people should have to sell their house to have care. You're in your early 30s. You're basically selling your house so you can have the drugs you need.
Yeah, it's horrible. I've fought hard over the last 2 years trying to get answers from my MP, trying to make the video showing how profound the cannabis is. How profound the cannabis is on my symptoms, and been palmed off, passed from pillar to post. The government, it doesn't fit their paradigm of being able to collect data, so they're not interested. They're not interested in my real life experience and the benefit of my quality of life, or the fact that, it's given me my life back. But I'll be honest, I'm looking at growing my own in a protest. I haven't yet seen a solid argument as to why I shouldn't be growing my own, or shouldn't be allowed to grow my own.
In reality, if you do, I'm not advocating it, but if you had a room in your house now where you were growing it under blue lights, is anyone going to send the police round, bearing in mind it is clearly for your own consumption, you have this health issue? I mean, I wonder if it is just in a grey area where they just turn a blind eye.
They will send the police round. They do bust in disabled people's doors all the time. It never gets took by the CPS, but the police have a duty to investigate crime. So if the police, if they find out, if they've got suspicion, they will knock your door in. They will drag you off with your wheelchair. I know people who have had their wheelchairs taken with them, and they will. I know a lady who's doing a suspended sentence. She's terminally ill, and she's growing it to help with her pains. She was sentenced to 2 years suspended sentence, and for growing her own plants.
That's kind of all that's open to you, by the way, isn't it? If you can't afford the £600 a month, by the sounds of it.
Well, you have another choice. You can take the risk with the black market. I'm very fortunate in the guy that I get it from assures me he knows where it's grown, but we can't deny the fact that the majority of the cannabis grown in Britain is grown by slaves. That's the truth of it, and so if you're not growing your own, you're potentially contributing to a slave industry.
So you're talking about people who have been trafficked, basically.
People that have been trafficked, an awful lot are found with trafficked Southeast Asian migrants watering the plants. Speak! And that horrifies me. I can't be a part of that. That's why my option is, I can't spend £600 a month. I can't. I need this medicine to live my life. There's an injustice, that you think... You think that the government have got your best interests in mind, and it's clear to me, with this cannabis issue, they do not have my best interests in mind. They don't have the thousands of other patients. They estimate 1.3 million people, this was polling done, use cannabis for medicinal purposes in the UK right now. 1.3 million people facing prison for using a medicine because they don't want to take the pharmaceuticals they were on.
I mean, I guess there will be some people listening to this, and it's difficult. I can't make up hypothetical stories because it's not my experience, but I'm sure there's some people listening to you now who will have experiences like, yes, but my son has mental health problems and he took cannabis because he was told it would make him better and it made him worse. It made him more paranoid. All the things you're describing as being alleviated by cannabis, some people will say, actually, I've seen examples where it's caused it's caused someone to feel more paranoid or to have feelings of self-harm and that kind of thing. That's one of the reasons, isn't it, that they haven't legalised it?
We're lucky now because it's less theory, and we can look at other countries and we can say what happens if it's legalised. Canada, 30 odd years, people using it medically allowed to grow their own. And it's only Britain and France that has this psychosis narrative. None of the other countries around the world actually have that narrative to do with cannabis, which is a bizarre phenomenon for our country. People like to blame things, and with cannabis Cannabis creates homeostasis. You know, that's kind of what it does. It kind of, you know, if people with pain, it alleviates their pain. It's so wide what it can do, which would also mean there are obviously some harms that can become of it, but what doesn't have harm? Horse riding comes with harm. I know driving, you know, driving is very dangerous. My whole life has been changed from driving. I know diazepam is a big problem in Scotland. You know, so why is that allowed to be prescribed and overprescribed? You know, arguably. You know, do I think that anybody should use cannabis whenever they wanted? Probably not. But as a medicine, I think it should almost be a first port of call. You know, if you've obviously over 21, lots of people who have complex mental health problems, those problems do start before you're 21, and cannabis is known to bring out, it's proven, it can bring out those problems that are already developing or lingering there. But it's also proven that no matter where in the world, what their laws are, how many of the population uses cannabis, the rates of schizophrenia stay at 1%. Globally, they're the rates everywhere. You know, you've got places like Jamaica where 40% of the population have tried cannabis in a year. They've still got 1% psychosis. So if it was a real danger, you would start seeing higher levels of psychosis in countries with higher usage, but you just don't. And so I think a lot of these arguments, while they're true, they're not took in context. You know, actually, these 1%, unfortunately, if it wasn't cannabis, it might have been alcohol. If it wasn't alcohol, it would have been tobacco. If it wasn't tobacco, it could have been caffeine. All of these things have also been linked to onsetting of psychosis, but it's not portrayed in the same way.
You've mentioned a few times that you've met other people in your circumstance. How's that come about then? So is it through the internet?
Yeah, Twitter, Reddit, YouTube videos, and I set up a Discord community where other medical patients or just cannabis users could join, ask questions about the process of becoming legal, because actually it's very easy to get a legal cannabis prescription if you've got money in Britain. You know, it's not reserved for... I've heard some people say it, and it's not my personal opinion, but I've heard some people say, oh, you need cannabis, Jim. I only use it for my anxiety. You know, I've had other patients say that to me, like... But to me, it's not about that. It's about the fact that why is there a double standard in the industry? Why can I go and pay for it and that change my life for the better? But if I want it on the NHS, which I had paid tax, you know, I'd earned well, I'd paid me taxes all the way up until my car crash. Why can't I access the health service I've paid for? You know, I always say we never had any debts before I had my car crash. They were bills. And all of a sudden they became debts because we couldn't pay them. No, do we go to the food bank? Do we buy Christmas presents for the kids? And so this is why we're moving in with the in-laws. You know, so that sustainability becomes easier. And then, you know, once that's easier, like I said, I'll probably grow my own. You know, I'll probably do it in protest. I'm probably going to let the police know I'm doing it. You know, this is the stage I'm at now. I just don't see how... I can't see how a jury of my peers would convict me as a criminal for wanting to walk and talk. Like, I just can't. I've got to the point now where I'm like, I can't see that happening. You know, I trust my fellow countrymen enough that I think if one day I go to court, I don't take no medicine, they'll see how brutal things are for me. The next day I go in and I puff in on this thing, doesn't even produce a cloud, and all of a sudden I can talk and walk, and they're gonna be like, well, I can send him to prison for this. But again, the law is the law, so you don't know if the judge will tell them you've got to send him to prison because he's been breaking the law, you know, because that's the law. And you just got to hope that they go against the judge and be like, no, this is wrong. And that's how, you know, and I know there are a lot of other patients taking that stand as well and contacting the local police forces and saying, we're growing, come and arrest us. We want to be tried in front of a jury of our peers to set precedent. You know, we've sent a lot of people with, you know, in wheelchairs, a lot of disabled people to prison in the last 30 years because they've chose cannabis. And why do people choose cannabis? These sick and disabled people ain't choosing cannabis because they want to get high. They're choosing it as an alternative to the prescription meds that ruin you. They ruin your gut. They ruin your hair. They ruin your motivation. And yes, there is a place and a time for them, but they are if you've got a long-term disability like myself, you haven't got a long term to live on pills.
And in the past year, your wife's had another child.
Yeah.
Would that have happened, do you think, if you hadn't been taking cannabis?
No way, I couldn't get an erection. I'll be honest with you, when I was on these pills, I didn't get an erection the whole time. So how could I have had a child? I thought I'd never had a child again. And it was after we found cannabis that I started getting myself back, getting my life back. We then found out about me baby, and her due date was the 25th of December. So when we found out we were pregnant again, and we both wanted more kids, you know, and we found out it was a special Christmas present from the universe.
Jim Finch. Needless to say, his experiences are his. You are a different person. If you're considering taking cannabis medicinally, then do consult your GP first. And if, like Jim, you do ever have thoughts of suicide, please remember there's always someone to talk to. The number for the Samaritans is in our show notes. So, my interview with Jim was at the end of 2021. I promised you an update on what he's been up to since then. Well, here's a voice memo he sent us.
Hi Olly, since we last spoke I have been up to loads. We did sell our house in the end and we ended up moving to a small holding in West Wales with Lou's parents. We started a TikTok and a YouTube vlogging our recovery and our journey to becoming self-sufficient here on our small holding. We're ticking with chickens on TikToks and fields and flocks on YouTube. Medication is still not affordable for most, but the choice and flowers available for anyone with a prescription has got a lot better. There is a huge variety on option at the moment. I've managed to stay on prescription due to our move releasing some financial pressures. 2 households combined into one is obviously half the bills, so that's made it easier for us. I think they need to make it legal to grow for anyone with a condition that would be eligible for a prescription. The government recently gave an outrageously gaslighting response to a petition asking for just this. You've got to understand that every single patient here understands cannabis and the medicine. So when the government outright lies to them, every single person knew it was an outright lie, and every single person knew it was a kick in the face. Really, there is no difference between a well homegrown bit of cannabis and the stuff you buy from medical cannabis. There's just not a difference. In fact, the homegrown cannabis might be slightly tastier, slightly more potent, slightly more effective at controlling your ailments. Yeah, that's it from me. I've been up to loads. Yes, you cheeky little bastard. Been up to loads, and yeah, just really thriving and really taking my recovery seriously, and I've come a real long way since we last spoke. So thanks very much, or as we say here in Wales now, diolch.
Thanks, Jim, and thank you for listening. Until next time, I've been Olly Mann, the producer Matt Hill, and we'll see you with something new on the 10th of June.